It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, one that began like any other. I was sipping my coffee at the kitchen counter, glancing through the daily news on my phone. The usual headlines flashed before my eyes, but my mind was elsewhere, already thinking about the meetings I had lined up for the day. Chloe was upstairs, getting ready for work, humming a tune I couldn't quite place. It was a typical morning in the Wilson household, or so I thought. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I wasn't expecting any deliveries, so I assumed it was a mistake. Setting my coffee down, I made my way to the front door. When I opened it, there was no one there, just a plain, unmarked package lying on the welcome mat. Puzzled, I picked it up and brought it inside. Back at the kitchen counter, I examined the package. It had no return address, just my name scrawled in neat, precise handwriting. I frowned, my curiosity piqued. Carefully, I opened it. Inside, there was a manila envelope and nothing else. My heart rate quickened as I tore open the envelope, revealing its contents. A stack of photographs. The first photo nearly made me drop the entire stack. There was Chloe, my Chloe, in a compromising position with a man I didn't recognize. They were in what looked like a hotel room, wrapped in each other's arms. My vision blurred, my hand trembling as I flipped through the photos. Each one was worse than the last, capturing moments of intimacy that were supposed to belong to us. A wave of nausea hit me, and I had to sit down. The room spun as I tried to process what I was seeing. How long had this been going on? Who was the man in the photos? Questions bombarded my mind, but there were no immediate answers, only the cold, hard evidence staring back at me. I heard Chloe's footsteps on the stairs. Panic surged through me, and I quickly shoved the photos back into the envelope, hiding it behind a stack of magazines. She entered the kitchen, smiling, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Morning, honey," she said, kissing me on the cheek. I forced a smile, my heart pounding in my chest. "Morning," I replied, my voice strained. I could feel my composure slipping, but I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. Chloe continued with her morning routine, completely unaware of the bombshell that had just been dropped on our lives. I watched her, feeling a mixture of love and betrayal. How could she do this to me? To us? As she left for work, I stood at the kitchen window, watching her drive away. My mind was racing, my emotions a tangled mess. I knew I couldn't let this go. I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. With Chloe gone, I retrieved the envelope and spread the photos out on the counter, examining each one closely. There had to be something, some clue that would lead me to the man who had shattered my world. And then I found it. A business card tucked between two photos. David Carter, financial advisor. The name meant nothing to me, but it was a start. I clenched my fists, a new resolve forming within me. This wasn't just about Chloe's betrayal anymore. It was about my dignity, my pride. I would uncover the truth, and they would both pay for what they had done. My heart ached, but beneath the pain, a fire burned. This was just the beginning. The rest of the day was a blur. I went through the motions at work, my mind constantly drifting back to the envelope and the photos hidden in my kitchen. By the time I returned home, I had replayed 1,000 different scenarios in my head. The confrontation was inevitable, but how would Chloe react? Would she lie, or would she break down and confess? Chloe's car was already in the driveway when I pulled up. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way to the front door. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them tonight. As I stepped inside, the familiar scent of her cooking wafted through the air, but it did nothing to soothe the turmoil within me. "Hey, honey," Chloe greeted me with a smile as I entered the kitchen. She was stirring a pot on the stove, completely at ease. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied curtly, barely able to mask the tension in my voice. "We need to talk." She turned to face me, her brow furrowing in concern. "What's wrong?" Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope, placing it on the counter between us. "This arrived today." Chloe's eyes widened as she stared at the envelope, then back at me. She hesitated for a moment before picking it up. As she pulled out the photos, her face went pale. "Ryan, Save it," I interrupted, my voice cold and hard. "I want the truth, Chloe. How long has this been going on?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she clutched the photos to her chest. "It's not what you think," she began. But I cut her off again. "Then what is it? Because it looks pretty damn clear to me, I snapped, my anger boiling over. Who is he? His name is David, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He's a colleague from work. And how long? I pressed, my fists clenched at my sides. Chloe hesitated, tears streaming down her face. About a year, she confessed. But it's not what you think, Ryan. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and devoid of humor. You never meant to hurt me? How exactly did you think this would end, Chloe? Did you think I'd never find out? She shook her head, sobbing now. I don't know. I was lonely, Ryan. You've been so distant, so consumed with work. I needed someone, and David was there. Her words stung, but they couldn't justify what she had done. So this is my fault? I asked incredulously. You're blaming me for your affair? No, I'm not blaming you, she said, her voice trembling. I'm just trying to explain. I felt so alone, and David made me feel wanted again. Spare me the excuses, I growled. You betrayed me, Chloe. You betrayed our marriage. She collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Ryan. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. I felt a pang of sorrow at her words, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger and betrayal coursing through me. Love? Is that what you call this? I gestured to the photos. Because it looks like anything but love to me. Chloe didn't respond, her sobs the only sound in the room. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. I need some air, I muttered, heading for the door. Ryan, please, she called after me, but I didn't stop. I stepped outside, the cool evening air hitting my face as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. I walked aimlessly for what felt like hours, the events of the evening replaying in my mind. Chloe's betrayal had shattered my world, and I didn't know how to piece it back together. But one thing was certain. I couldn't let this go unpunished. They had both broken something in me, and they would pay for it. By the time I returned home, the house was dark and silent. Chloe was asleep in our bed, her face tear-streaked and troubled even in sleep. I stood in the doorway for a moment watching her, my heart aching with a mix of love and anger. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about Chloe's betrayal anymore. It was about my dignity, my pride. I would uncover the full extent of their affair, and I would make them both pay for what they had done. My heart ached, but beneath the pain, a fire burned. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. Chloe and I barely spoke, the weight of her betrayal hanging over us like a dark cloud. Each time I looked at her, the images from the photos flashed in my mind, tearing at the fabric of our 15-year marriage. I had to know more, to understand the full extent of her affair with David. I spent hours alone, brooding and reflecting on our past. We had built a life together, filled with memories of love and laughter. But now those memories felt tainted, overshadowed by Chloe's betrayal. I found myself questioning everything, every smile, every kiss, every promise we had made. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, I retreated to my home office. I pulled out my laptop and began to dig deeper into Chloe's world. I went through her emails, her social media accounts, and her phone records. It felt invasive, but I needed answers. As I delved deeper, the truth began to unravel. The affair had started innocently enough. Work lunches that turned into dinners. Business trips that provided the perfect cover for their secret meetings. Each new discovery was like a knife to the heart, cutting deeper and deeper. One email chain stood out. It was from 6 months ago when Chloe had gone on a business trip to Chicago. The emails between her and David were flirtatious, filled with promises of stolen moments and secret rendezvous. My hands trembled as I read them, my anger growing with each word. Feeling a surge of determination, I decided to dig into David's life as well. His social media profiles were public, and it didn't take long to find his wife Megan. They seemed like the perfect couple, smiling photos, family vacations, and anniversary posts. It was sickening to see how easily he had deceived his wife, just as Chloe had deceived me. I reached out to Megan through a private message, carefully crafting my words. I didn't want to hurt her, but she deserved to know the truth. I included a few of the incriminating photos, hoping she would believe me. My heart pounded as I hit send, knowing this would set off a chain of events that couldn't be undone. The next day, I received a response from Megan. She was shocked and devastated, just as I had been. We exchanged messages, sharing our pain and anger. It was strange to find solace in a stranger, but Megan understood my pain in a way no one else could. Over the next few weeks, Megan and I continued to communicate, forming an unlikely alliance. We shared information and planned our next steps, determined to expose Chloe and David's betrayal publicly. The thought of revenge kept me going, giving me a sense of purpose amidst the chaos. One evening, Megan and I decided to meet in person. We chose a quiet cafe in a neighboring town, far enough away from prying eyes. As I walked in, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting at a corner table, looking as weary and heartbroken as I felt. "Ryan?" she asked, standing as I approached. "Megan," I replied, shaking her hand. "It's good to finally meet you in person." We sat down and ordered coffee, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken pain. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two strangers brought together by betrayal. "I can't believe this is happening," Megan said, her voice barely above a whisper. "David and we've been married for 10 years. I thought we were happy." "I know the feeling," I replied, sighing deeply. "Chloe and I have been together for 15 years. I never imagined she could do something like this." We talked for hours, sharing our stories and our plans for revenge. Megan was just as determined as I was to make David and Chloe pay. We decided to wait for the perfect opportunity, a company event where both Chloe and David would be present. It would be the ideal setting to expose their affair publicly. As we parted ways that evening, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie with Megan. We were united by our pain and our desire for justice. The plan was in motion, and I was ready to see it through to the end. Returning home, I found Chloe sitting on the couch staring at the TV. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with sadness and regret. "Ryan, can we talk?" she asked softly. I shook my head, unable to face her. "Not now, Chloe. I need some time." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand." As I went to bed that night, I knew there was no turning back. The wheels were in motion, and soon the truth would come to light. Chloe and David had broken something in me, and they would both pay for it. The days turned into weeks, and the bitterness in my heart only grew stronger. Chloe and I were living like strangers, the air thick with tension and unspoken words. The betrayal had cut deep, but the fire of revenge kept me going. Every interaction with Chloe was a reminder of her infidelity, and my resolve to make her and David pay only hardened. Megan and I continued to communicate regularly, each conversation bringing us closer to our ultimate goal. Our plan to publicly expose Chloe and David at the company event was set, but we wanted to hit them where it would hurt the most: their finances. One evening, Megan and I met again, this time at a small, discreet bar far from our usual haunts. We sat in a dimly lit corner booth, our voices low as we discussed the details of our plan. "Ryan, we need to be smart about this," Megan began, her eyes determined. "If we're going to take everything from them, we need to do it right." I nodded, leaning in closer. "I've been thinking about that. We need access to their accounts, their investments, everything. We need to drain them dry." Megan pulled out a small notepad and a pen. "David's been careless with his passwords. I've seen him type them in more than once. I think I can get into his accounts." "That's perfect," I said, a sense of relief washing over me. "Chloe has a habit of writing things down. I've seen her keep a little black book with all her passwords. I'll find it." We spent the next hour outlining our strategy. First, Megan would access David's accounts and transfer the funds to a secure account we had set up in her name. I would do the same with Chloe's accounts. We would then use the money to cover our tracks, making it look like a sophisticated hacking scheme that had drained their finances. As we discussed the details, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie with Megan. We were both wounded, both seeking justice for the pain we had endured. Our plan was risky, but we were willing to do whatever it took to make them pay. The next day, I began my search for Chloe's little black book. She was at work, giving me the perfect opportunity to scour the house. I checked her office first, rummaging through drawers and shelves. My frustration grew with each passing minute as I came up empty-handed. Finally, I found it tucked away in the back of her bedside table drawer. A small, unassuming black notebook filled with neatly written passwords and account details. I snapped a photo of each page, my heart racing with anticipation. Meanwhile, Megan had successfully accessed David's accounts. She called me that evening, her voice brimming with excitement. "I've got everything, Ryan. His bank accounts, investment portfolios, And even his retirement fund. We can transfer it all. Great work, Megan, I replied, feeling a rush of adrenaline. I've got Chloe's information too. Let's do this. Over the next few days, we executed our plan with meticulous precision. We transferred the funds to our secure account, careful to cover our tracks and make it look like an external breach. Each transfer felt like a small victory, a step closer to justice. On the day of the company event, Megan and I were ready. The funds were secure, and our plan to publicly expose Chloe and David was set. As I dressed for the event, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Tonight, everything would come to light. The event was held at a lavish hotel downtown, a grand affair with colleagues and clients mingling over cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Chloe and I arrived together, maintaining the facade of a happy couple. It was excruciating, but necessary. I spotted Megan across the room, giving her a subtle nod. She returned the gesture, signaling that everything was in place. As the evening progressed, my heart pounded in my chest, the moment of truth drawing closer. Finally, the time came. The room quieted as the CEO took the stage to give a speech. Megan and I exchanged a final glance, and I knew it was now or never. I made my way to the sound booth, where we had arranged for the incriminating photos and messages to be projected on the screen. As the CEO finished his speech, the lights dimmed and the screen flickered to life. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the photos of Chloe and David appeared, their affair laid bare for all to see. Chloe's face went white, her eyes wide with shock and horror. David, standing with his wife Megan, looked equally stunned. The room erupted into chaos, whispers and accusations flying in every direction. I stood back, watching it all unfold, a strange sense of satisfaction washing over me. They were exposed and humiliated, and soon they would realize the full extent of their downfall when they checked their accounts. Megan approached me, her eyes shining with a mixture of triumph and relief. "We did it, Ryan?" "Yes, we did," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. Chloe and David had broken something in me, but now they were the ones who would suffer. As the chaos continued around us, I knew this was just the beginning of their reckoning. Chloe and David had taken everything from us, but now we had taken everything from them. The aftermath of the company event was even more chaotic than I had anticipated. The revelation of Chloe and David's affair had sent shockwaves through their professional and personal circles. The very next day, Chloe and I sat in tense silence at the breakfast table. Her phone had been buzzing incessantly with messages and calls, but she ignored them, staring blankly at her untouched coffee. I could tell she was struggling to process everything that had happened. The humiliation, the betrayal, the public exposure, it was all crashing down on her, and I took a grim satisfaction in her misery. She deserved it. "Ryan," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't understand how this could have happened. Who did this?" I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "Does it really matter, Chloe? The truth is out now." Her eyes filled with tears. "But why? Why would someone do this to us?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stood up and left the room, unable to bear her presence any longer. I had more important things to deal with. Megan and I stayed in close contact over the next few days, monitoring the fallout from our actions. David had been fired from his job, his reputation in ruins. Megan had moved out of their home, taking their children with her. She was filing for divorce, and David's financial situation was in shambles. Chloe's situation wasn't much better. She had been placed on leave pending an investigation by her company. Our shared friends and family were bombarding us with questions, their concern and curiosity only adding to the stress. I knew it was only a matter of time before Chloe discovered the financial devastation we had wrought. One evening, as I sat in my office, my phone buzzed with a message from Megan. "It's done," it read. "David checked his accounts today. He's panicking. How's Chloe?" I replied. "She hasn't figured it out yet, but it won't be long." That night, I heard Chloe's panicked voice from the living room. I walked in to find her on the phone with her bank, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean all our accounts are empty?" she cried, her voice rising. "There must be some mistake." I watched as the realization dawned on her. She ended the call, turning to me with a look of utter desperation. "Ryan, our money, it's all gone. Everything." I feigned surprise. "What? How is that possible?" "I don't know," she wailed, collapsing onto the couch. "Everything we've worked for, it's all gone. What are we going to do?" I sat beside her, putting on a mask of concern. "We'll figure it out, Chloe. We'll get through this." But inside, I felt nothing but satisfaction. This was what she deserved. She had betrayed me and broken my heart, and now she was reaping the consequences. Over the next few days, Chloe and David's worlds continued to crumble. They were forced to confront the reality of their actions, their betrayal laid bare for all to see. Megan and I watched from the sidelines, united in our quest for justice. Eventually, Chloe discovered the full extent of the financial damage. She was devastated, unable to comprehend how everything had been taken from her. She pleaded with the banks and with her company, but there was no recourse. The money was gone, and so was her reputation. One evening, as we sat in the dim light of our living room, Chloe turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Ryan, I'm so sorry for everything. I know I hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But please, help me understand how this happened." I looked at her, feeling a strange sense of closure. "Chloe, you brought this on yourself. Your actions had consequences, and now you have to face them." She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to feel loved again." I stood up, my voice cold. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray me. Now you have to live with the consequences of your choices." I left her there, her sobs echoing through the house. I knew our marriage was over, but I felt no sadness, only a grim sense of satisfaction. Chloe and David had taken everything from me, but now they were the ones who had lost everything. In the days that followed, I began to rebuild my life. Megan and I continued to support each other, our unlikely friendship born out of shared pain and a quest for justice. We had done what we set out to do. We had made them pay. As I stood on the threshold of a new chapter in my life, I felt a sense of peace. The betrayal had shattered me, but in its wake, I had found strength and resolve. Chloe and David were nothing but painful memories now, and I was ready to move forward. This was the end of their story, but for me, it was just the beginning of a new one. The fallout from our actions had left Chloe in a state of shock and desperation. She spent days frantically trying to recover the lost money, speaking to banks, hiring lawyers, and even reaching out to IT specialists in a vain attempt to trace the supposed hackers. The stress and anxiety took a visible toll on her, and she looked more haggard and defeated with each passing day. One evening, Chloe confronted me, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Ryan, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. "I can't handle this on my own. I need your help." I nodded, maintaining my facade of concern. "Of course, Chloe. Let's sit down and figure this out." We sat at the kitchen table, a stack of documents and bank statements spread out before us. Chloe's hands trembled as she flipped through the papers, her frustration palpable. "The banks are saying the transfers were authorized, but I never did this. I never moved our money." I leaned in, feigning puzzlement. "Is there any way someone could have gotten access to your accounts?" She shook her head. "I don't know how. I've been so careful with my passwords." I suppressed a smirk, knowing full well how easy it had been to access her accounts. "Maybe it was someone close to us, someone who knew your passwords." Chloe's eyes widened in realization. "David, he must have done this. He had access to my computer and my phone. He could have stolen our money." I saw my opportunity to drive a wedge between them even further. "It's possible, Chloe, but why would he do that?" She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "I don't know. Maybe he wanted to leave me with nothing. Maybe this was his way of getting back at me." I placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out. Maybe you should confront him. Ask him directly." The next day, Chloe took my advice. She arranged to meet David in a public place, a cafe where they could talk without causing a scene. I watched from a distance, my heart pounding with anticipation. Chloe arrived first, sitting nervously at a table near the window. David walked in a few minutes later, looking just as weary and defeated as Chloe. They exchanged tense greetings, and I could see the pain in Chloe's eyes as she looked at him. "What do you want, Chloe?" David asked, his voice cold. "I need to know if you had anything to do with the money," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "Did you take it?" David's eyes widened in shock. "What? No, I didn't take your money. Why would you think that?" "Because someone did," Chloe snapped. Someone drained all our accounts, and I know you had access to my passwords." David shook his head, his face contorted with anger. "I had nothing to do with this. You think I'd steal from you after everything we've been through?" Chloe's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to think anymore. Everything is falling apart, and I don't know who to trust." David leaned forward, his expression softening. "Chloe, I swear I had nothing to do with this. We need to find out who did this and get our money back." As they continued to talk, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. Their relationship was crumbling, just as mine with Chloe had. But this was what they deserved for betraying us. In the following weeks, Chloe's desperation only grew. She spent hours on the phone with lawyers and investigators, trying to piece together what had happened. But every lead turned into a dead end, and every avenue of hope was quickly closed off. One evening she came to me, her eyes hollow and defeated. "Ryan, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to fix this." I looked at her, my heart hardening. "Chloe, maybe it's time to accept that this is the consequence of your actions. You betrayed me. You betrayed us. Now you're facing the repercussions." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I stood up, my resolve firm. "Sorry isn't enough, Chloe. You've destroyed everything we had. Now you have to live with that." As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure. Chloe's desperation and guilt were evident, and there was no turning back for her now. She had lost everything, and it was exactly what she deserved. The plan had worked flawlessly, and now it was time to move forward. Chloe and David were broken, their lives shattered. And for Megan and me, it was a new beginning, free from the pain and betrayal that had once consumed us. As I looked out into the night, I knew this was just the beginning of my new life. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to shape. Chloe's desperation was a reminder of the consequences of betrayal, and I was determined never to let anyone hurt me like that again. Chloe's desperation had reached a breaking point. She was a shell of the confident woman I once knew, her life unraveling before her eyes. I watched her descend into a state of hopelessness, the weight of her actions crushing her spirit. It was only a matter of time before she sought answers from the one person she had yet to confront directly, me. One evening, Chloe cornered me in the living room, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Ryan, we need to talk. Now." I nodded, maintaining a calm demeanor. "All right, Chloe, what's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. The money, the affair, all of it. And I keep coming back to one question. How did you find out about David and me?" I looked at her, feigning innocence. "I told you, Chloe, I saw the photos on your phone. That's how I found out." She shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "No, it's more than that. The way the money disappeared, the timing of everything. It feels like someone planned this, someone who knew exactly what they were doing." I felt a flicker of tension, but kept my composure. "What are you implying, Chloe?" "I'm saying," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "that maybe you had something to do with this. Maybe you're the one who took the money." I met her gaze, my expression turning cold. "You think I would do that? Steal our own money just to punish you?" "Yes," she replied, her voice breaking. "Because you're hurt and angry, and you wanted to make me suffer." I took a step closer, my eyes locking onto hers. "You betrayed me, Chloe. You broke my heart and destroyed our marriage. You think I would stoop to your level?" She flinched, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to think anymore, Ryan. Everything is falling apart, and I can't trust anyone." I sighed, my resolve softening just a fraction. "Chloe, I'm hurt. I'm angry. But I didn't take the money. I would never do that. This is the result of your actions and your choices. You need to face that." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I stood over her, feeling a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. "Sorry isn't enough, Chloe. You need to live with the consequences of your actions." Over the next few days, Chloe's desperation turned to resignation. She stopped trying to recover the lost money, realizing it was a futile effort. Her relationship with David was beyond repair, and she had lost everything she had worked for. Megan and I continued to communicate, our bond growing stronger through our shared ordeal. We had accomplished what we set out to do, but there was still one final piece of the puzzle left. ensuring Chloe and David never recovered from this. We decided to meet one last time to finalize our plan. Megan and I sat in a quiet cafe, our faces reflecting the resolve and determination that had brought us this far. "Ryan," Megan began, "we've come this far. We've destroyed their reputations and taken their money, but we need to make sure they can't bounce back from this." I nodded, understanding her sentiment. "What do you have in mind?" Megan leaned in, her voice low. "We need to spread the word about their affair, make sure everyone knows what they did. They need to be ostracized, isolated." I considered her words, realizing the finality of our plan. "You're right. We need to make sure they can't rebuild their lives on the ashes of our pain." Over the next few days, Megan and I set our final plan into motion. We reached out to friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, subtly spreading the word about Chloe and David's affair. The scandal spread like wildfire, their reputations further tarnished by the whispers and rumors that followed them. Chloe's company decided to terminate her employment, citing the scandal as detrimental to their image. David, already jobless and financially ruined, found himself even more isolated as former friends and colleagues turned their backs on him. The culmination of our efforts came one evening when Chloe confronted me again, her face etched with despair. "Ryan, it's over. They fired me. I've lost everything." I looked at her, feeling a sense of finality. "This is the life you chose, Chloe. The consequences of your actions." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, and I'm so sorry. For everything." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and walked away, leaving her to face the ruins of her life. It was the end of our story, the final chapter in a tale of betrayal and revenge. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a sense of peace. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to shape. Chloe and David had taken everything from us, but Megan and I had taken our revenge. And now, we were free to move forward, leaving the pain and betrayal behind. The plan had been executed flawlessly, and now it was time to start anew. The fallout from Chloe and David's downfall was complete. Megan and I had accomplished what we set out to do. The dust was beginning to settle, and it was time to start thinking about our futures, free from the shadows of betrayal. One sunny afternoon, I met Megan at a park near her new apartment. We sat on a bench, watching children play and couples stroll by, the normalcy of life around us feeling almost surreal after everything we had been through. "We did it," Megan said, a hint of relief in her voice. "We actually did it." I nodded, feeling the weight of the past months lifting off my shoulders. "We did, but now we have to figure out what's next." Megan sighed, looking out at the park. "I'm starting over. New apartment, new job, everything. It's scary, but it's also a relief." "I know what you mean," I replied. "It's strange to think about a future without Chloe, but it's also freeing." She turned to me, her eyes filled with determination. "You'll get through this, Ryan. We both will. We just have to take it one day at a time." As we talked, I realized how much we had both changed. The pain and anger that had driven us were fading, replaced by a sense of resolve to rebuild our lives. We had been brought together by shared betrayal, but now we were looking toward the future. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the routine and the sense of accomplishment it brought. I reconnected with old friends, mended broken relationships, and started focusing on my own well-being. I began to see a therapist, working through the emotional scars left by Chloe's betrayal. Megan and I remained close, our bond strengthened by our shared experience. We supported each other, celebrating small victories and offering comfort during tough times. Our friendship was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was always hope for a better future. One evening, as I was going through some old boxes in the attic, I came across a photo album from the early years of my marriage to Chloe. Flipping through the pages, I saw the smiles and laughter, the moments of genuine happiness that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I paused on a photo of us at our wedding, Chloe in her white dress, and me in my tuxedo, both of us beaming with joy. It was a stark contrast to the reality of our lives now. I closed the album, a sense of closure washing over me. The next day, I met Megan for coffee. As we sat in a cozy cafe, she noticed the change in my demeanor. "You seem different today." more at peace. I think I am, I admitted. I found some old photos last night from my wedding. It made me realize how much has changed and how far I've come. Megan smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You're stronger than you know, Ryan. We both are. And we have a chance to create something new, something better. Her words resonated with me. We had both been through hell, but we had come out the other side stronger and more resilient. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. As the months passed, I found myself embracing the changes in my life. I took up new hobbies, traveled to places I had always wanted to visit, and started dating again. It was a slow process, but with each step, I felt more like myself. Megan and I continued to be each other's support system, sharing our triumphs and setbacks. We celebrated her new job and my promotion, and we laughed about the absurdity of our past situation. One evening, as we walked through the park where we had first met to plan our revenge, Megan turned to me, a thoughtful expression on her face. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't found out about them? I considered her question, then shook my head. No, because what's the point? We can't change the past. We can only move forward. She nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. You're right, and I'm glad we're moving forward together. As we continued our walk, I felt a sense of closure and hope. The past was behind us, and the future was a blank canvas, ready for us to paint with new experiences and new memories. Chloe and David were distant memories, their betrayal a painful chapter that had been written and closed. Now it was time to start a new chapter, one filled with possibility and the promise of a better tomorrow. As we walked side by side, I knew that whatever the future held, Megan and I would face it together, stronger and more determined than ever. The months of chaos and revenge had finally settled into a new normal. Megan and I had both moved on from the pain and betrayal, and our lives were starting to take shape in ways we had never imagined. It was time to close this chapter once and for all. One crisp autumn morning, I decided to visit Chloe one last time. There were still some things left unsaid, and I needed to ensure that I had truly moved on. I drove to the small apartment she had rented after leaving our home. The leaves were falling gently, creating a golden blanket on the ground, and the air was filled with the scent of change. Chloe opened the door, looking more fragile than ever. Her eyes were dull, and she seemed to have aged significantly in the past months. She invited me in, and we sat in her modest living room, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. Ryan, I didn't expect to see you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to talk, Chloe, I replied, my tone calm and measured. There are things I need to say. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I understand. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts. We both made mistakes, Chloe. You betrayed me, and I retaliated in ways I never thought I would. But holding on to this anger and pain isn't going to help either of us move forward. She looked at me, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Ryan, for everything. I know I can't change what I did, but I want you to know that I regret it deeply. I believe you, I said softly. But it's time for both of us to let go. We need to start over, and that means leaving the past behind. Chloe nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Ryan. I hope you find happiness. You deserve it. You too, Chloe, I replied, standing up to leave. Take care of yourself. As I walked out of her apartment, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The burden of anger and betrayal had finally lifted, leaving me with a renewed sense of purpose. Megan and I met later that day, our usual cafe providing a familiar backdrop for our conversations. She noticed the change in my demeanor immediately. You look like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders, she remarked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. I talked to Chloe, I explained. We both needed to let go of the past, and I think we finally did. Megan smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. I'm proud of you, Ryan. That's not an easy thing to do. It wasn't, I admitted, but it was necessary, for both of us. As we sipped our coffee, we talked about our plans for the future. Megan had been offered a promotion at her job, and I had decided to take up a new hobby, photography. It felt good to look ahead, to dream about what was possible. A few weeks later, Megan and I took a trip to the coast. It was a spontaneous decision, a chance to escape the city and breathe in the fresh sea air. We walked along the beach, the waves crashing against the shore, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. Standing at the water's edge, Megan turned to me, her face glowing with happiness. "Ryan, do you think we'll ever find love again?" I looked at her, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "I think we already have, Megan, in each other." She smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "You're right. We've been through so much together, and we've come out stronger." As we embraced, I knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to create. As the sun set over the ocean, casting a golden glow over everything, I realized that sometimes the darkest times in our lives can lead us to the brightest tomorrow. We just have to be willing to let go and embrace the journey ahead. The end of one story is always the beginning of another. And for Megan and me, our story was just beginning.